Gasoline drifts first, then mesquite smoke follows it. The two scents move together across a midnight highway where the asphalt still releases the day's stored heat. Leather from passing truck seats, warm rubber, and dust settle into the air, as if the road itself is breathing slowly. You are standing at the edge of a border that does not behave like a line. It behaves like memory. This stretch of land between northern Mexico and Texas has carried more songs than signatures. Long before digital archives, radio towers stored voices in the dark, letting them travel across distance without asking where they came from. Here, stories move faster than people, and sometimes they move farther. A sodium light flickers above an aging truck stop. Inside, empty booths sit beneath cracked vinyl cushions that hold the faint scent of coffee and diesel. A payphone hangs crooked against a wall dusted with fine sand that creeps in each night through unseen gaps. Behind the counter, an old cassette recorder clicks once, then again, as if waiting for someone who never arrives. Locals say a melody used to pass through this building after midnight. Not every night, only certain ones, the kind when traffic slowed and conversations shortened. They say the song carried pieces of something unfinished. Songs like this do not behave like entertainment. They behave like coded letters. And this one carries details placed carefully between its verses. You are about to hear what the song never told you. The border is introduced to you not as geography, but as an archive. Radio frequencies cross fences without slowing. Voices repeat themselves until memory begins to accept them as truth. When records disappear, melodies remain. Decades earlier, a small regional station operated less than 60 miles from this highway. The transmitter hummed louder than the air conditioner. The signal pushed through desert wind strong enough to bend antenna wires slightly off direction. Inside that station worked a retired radio operator named Ernesto Calderon, a thin man with silver hair combed straight back and nicotine-stained fingers that still moved as if adjusting invisible knobs. He remembers a voice, not a face, not a name, only a voice, steady, controlled, never rushed. She spoke like she already knew the ending, and like she wasn't afraid of it. Ernesto says she never entered through the front door. He never saw her sign the guest log, but he remembers the air changing whenever she stood near the recording room window. Cooler, still. No one questioned it then. Border stations learned not to. The memory sits quietly until it begins to connect with other fragments. A motel ledger from the same year shows a room paid in cash without identification. The clerk remembers only one detail, an envelope left on a bedside table, sealed but never addressed. A highway patrol record notes headlights parked near a closed service road long after midnight. No violation, no stop, just headlights waiting. The story forms the way desert wind shapes sand, slowly, then all at once. She steps out of a car. The door closes softly. She places the envelope on the motel table. She looks toward distant headlights. No name appears. Not yet. Only fragments. Only motion. You begin to understand something important. This ballad does not remember events the way ordinary songs do. It remembers decisions. Small ones. Final ones. Some songs remember events, the narrator says quietly. But this one remembers decisions. The recorder inside the truck stop clicks again. Magnetic tape begins to spin. A faint accordion emerges beneath static, fragile at first, then steadier. The melody carries weight without raising its volume. Notes stretch like long highways, repeating just enough to stay recognizable, without revealing everything. This is how coded stories survive. Not through detail, through structure. Time moves forward, but the archive does not. It waits for someone willing to notice what was always there. You move deeper into the room. Behind the counter sits a cardboard box sealed decades ago with yellowed tape. Dust rests across its surface in soft layers that break apart when touched. Inside are old receipts, faded matchbooks, and cassette tapes stacked without order. One cassette stands apart. Its plastic shell has turned slightly cloudy. The label is worn thin, the ink softened by humidity and years of handling. For a moment, the letters cannot be read. Only faint strokes remain. You tilt the tape toward the light. The ink sharpens. The name appears slowly, as if returning rather than revealing itself. Camelia la Texana. And now the archive begins to open. Static snaps first, not softly, not gradually, but in sharp electric bursts that cut through the quiet of a late-night broadcast, like small sparks jumping across exposed wire. The speakers hum, then crackle again, until a distant accordion begins to rise beneath the interference, its notes slightly blurred as if traveling through a closed door before reaching the microphone. You are not listening to a clean recording. You are listening to something that was never meant to be logged. The year is uncertain at first, because the station records do not agree with each other. Paper logs list different program blocks. Tape catalogs reference segments that do not exist. Transmission notes show gaps where announcements should be. Somewhere between those inconsistencies, the corrido enters public airwaves for the first time, and no one can explain how. Inside the reconstructed studio, the sound builds in layers. Boots shift across aged wooden flooring. A microphone stand slides upward with a soft metallic friction. A chair leg drags slightly, then stops. The air carries the faint echo of a room larger than necessary for a regional broadcast, suggesting equipment placed carefully rather than casually. But no voices introduce the track. No host speaks. No sponsor appears. The melody simply arrives. Border radio in that era did not operate like modern programming. Stations sat close enough to migration routes that travelers often carried songs farther than distributors ever could. Truck drivers moved cassette copies across state lines. Market vendors traded recordings along with produce shipments. Corridos traveled through glove compartments, lunch pails, and jacket pockets, carried not by promotion, but by repetition. Music served two purposes: entertainment for listeners, encryption for those who understood. You begin to notice how often the song references movement without naming destinations. Highways appear without mile markers. Meetings occur without addresses. Decisions happen without explanation. These patterns were not unusual for border ballads, but this recording behaves differently. It feels positioned, placed, timed. Investigators who later reviewed surviving materials discovered something unusual. The broadcast timestamp appears before any confirmed studio session. The air date exists. The recording date does not. This contradiction introduces the first promise question. Who requested the first recording session under a false name? Station staff from that period remembered unusual scheduling instructions arriving by phone rather than written request. One technician recalled being told to leave a recording room unlocked after midnight without asking who would use it. He never saw anyone enter, but he remembers hearing chairs move. The second question follows quietly behind it. Why did multiple witnesses describe the same voice differently? Some remembered the tone low and steady. Others insisted it sounded softer, almost conversational. A few claimed the voice carried an accent that shifted depending on the line. Memory begins to separate when details refuse to stay fixed. The third question surfaces as the investigation moves toward distribution. How did the song spread faster than the station's broadcast range? Within weeks, cassette copies appeared in towns beyond the transmitter's technical coverage. Market vendors sold recordings labeled with handwriting that did not match station archives. Drivers reported hearing the melody in locations where the signal should not have reached. Movement without source, circulation without origin. Then the final question arrives, and it does not behave like the others. Who was listening the night before the broadcast ever happened? This question never settles. It does not connect to paperwork or testimony. It remains suspended, like static that never fully disappears between frequencies. You are meant to carry it forward. The studio reconstruction continues. The accordion grows clearer now, its notes moving with steady rhythm while the background noises slowly fade. The microphone no longer shifts. The chair stops scraping. Even the room tone softens, leaving only the recording itself. It feels less like a performance and more like documentation. Border communities during this era relied on corridos not only for storytelling, but for navigation. Songs communicated reputation. They marked alliances. They warned listeners without using direct language. When official systems failed to track movement across the region, music quietly filled the gaps. This recording fits that tradition, but something about its timing refuses to align. Decades later, audio engineers studying surviving copies noticed faint pre-echo beneath the opening notes, suggesting the tape had been recorded over older material. Yet no earlier recording has ever surfaced. They say that when tapes are reused too many times, fragments of previous voices remain inside the magnetic layers, too soft to hear clearly, but strong enough to shape the sound that replaces them. Grandmothers along the border still mention this when discussing old recordings. They say songs remember what people try to replace. The melody continues for just under 3 minutes before ending without announcement. No applause, no closing words, only a soft mechanical rotation as the recording reaches its final groove. Then silence returns, but not completely. A faint spinning sound remains, steady and mechanical, continuing long after the music stops. The tape has reached its end, yet the reel keeps turning because no one is there to stop it. The studio sits empty, the broadcast light fades, and somewhere in the dark, a tape reel spins alone in an empty studio. The rough threads of embroidered denim drag softly across faded motel wallpaper, each raised stitch catching against the paper's peeling texture, as if the fabric itself is testing the wall for memory. The room carries the quiet wear of travelers who never signed their names, where the air sits still and layered with dust, and where the light from a single lamp presses sideways across cracked plaster and worn furniture. She stands near the wall, close enough for the denim sleeve to brush against it, as she removes the jacket slowly, carefully, without rushing the movement. The fabric bends with weight, not only from thread, but from intention. The embroidery spreads across the back in looping patterns, thin gold lines curving through darker stitching, intersecting shapes that resemble rivers, highway bends, and desert ridges without ever forming recognizable maps. At first glance, you are not meant to understand the design immediately. You are meant to feel it first. Border communities have long carried memory in objects that travel easily. Paper can be confiscated. Identification can be questioned. But clothing moves quietly across checkpoints, folded into suitcases, worn under open skies, passed between hands without documentation. In places where routes change faster than official records, decoration becomes language. Investigators later discovered that certain stitching patterns appeared repeatedly across archived photographs taken years apart. The same curved lines surfaced in the different towns. The same angled patterns appeared on jackets worn by different travelers. Each design shifted slightly, adjusting to terrain, weather, and enforcement patterns, movement written into fabric, memory without paper. Interviews from the region describe a woman whose jackets changed designs depending on which crossings were active. Older artisans remember seeing her return to small tailoring rooms carrying folded denim pieces and colored thread, requesting adjustments without explaining why the patterns needed to change. They say these techniques were hidden for generations inside family craft traditions, passed from grandmother to granddaughter through instruction that sounded like decoration, but functioned like direction. Not every stitch was ornamental. Some stitches were operational. Inside the motel room, her breathing remains steady. Her hands move without hesitation. The jacket rests across the bed for only a moment before she folds it once, then again, aligning the seams carefully, as though certain lines must meet for the design to complete itself. Controlled motion. Deliberate silence. She does not look toward the window, even when distant headlights pass across the curtains. She does not reach for the telephone sitting near the lamp. Every action suggests preparation rather than waiting. The motel clerk remembers the exchange because of how quietly it happened. He stands near the doorway holding a small envelope, unsure whether to step forward or remain still. She speaks without raising her voice. Cloth remembers longer than ink. The envelope changes hands. The conversation ends. No signatures follow. Years later, researchers compare archived photographs from regional newspapers, immigration reports, and roadside documentation collections. When the images are layered side by side, the embroidery patterns begin aligning with known smuggling corridors active during that period. Curved thread lines mirror river crossings. Angled shapes match desert road forks. Small repeating stitches appear exactly where patrol routes once shifted seasonally. Folklore begins turning into structure. Decoration begins turning into direction. The discovery does not arrive dramatically. It builds slowly, like fabric tightening between fingers as tension increases across each thread. Analysts trace patterns across multiple garments and notice that no two jackets contain identical layouts. Each piece reflects a specific moment in time, capturing roots that existed briefly before disappearing again. Temporary geography, permanent stitching. The motel reconstruction returns to the room under dim light. The jacket now rests folded on the bed, its outer surface showing only simple decorative shapes. Nothing appears unusual until the fabric bends slightly along one seam, revealing how certain thread lines align only when folded at precise angles. A map appears, then disappears again when the fabric relaxes. You begin to understand how movement could exist without paper trails, how navigation could survive inside texture rather than ink. The camera lingers on the folded denim resting beneath the lamp's warm glow, the stitching quietly holding its layered meaning, while shadows settle across the room. The jacket remains still, but the roots inside it do not. Under the soft pressure of folded seams and intersecting thread, a stitched map waits quietly inside the fabric. The warmth clings to the asphalt, sticky and thick, the kind that makes your clothes seem fused to your skin. And then it collapses. It falls so suddenly that the desert seems to shiver in disbelief. Witnesses remember their own breath puffing like smoke in the streetlight glow, though it should not have. Metal surfaces cool faster than expectation. The glass of parked vehicles fogs, as if the desert itself exhales condensation. A wind, initially scraping along the sand in the usual northward crawl, stops. Then it reverses, a brief tug from the south, curling dust into loops that hang suspended in the sudden chill. Every leaf of discarded paper lifts slightly, quivering, as though the air itself weighs differently now. Engine heat bleeds from parked trucks in uneven streams. The warmth retreats too fast, leaving tires and radiators trembling under a new skin of cold. It is here, at this border crossing, that the first sign appears. Not a shape in the night, not a whisper of flame or shadow, but a nature-born omen. The atmosphere itself bends before human memory can catch it. Observers later report a faint electrical scent in the air, like wet stone or old lightning, lingering long after the chill sets deep. The protagonist stands rigid beside the roadside cab, hands folded at the waist, eyes lock on the approaching horizon, calculating. Nothing trembles, no muscle flinches. There is intention in the stillness. If the road closes, the song opens, he says. The words are soft, almost swallowed by the cold. Yet the sentence hangs, drawn out by the thickness of the air and the sudden silence. Others nod, unsure if acknowledgement or acquiescence. A gunshot cuts through the night without a trace of light. No muzzle flare, no echo's rhythm that matches expectation. Some say it came from the north, others from the south. Some claim there was no shot at all, only a vibration in the stomach that convinces you sound passed through before it existed. The confusion settles over the group like a fog heavier than the air. Dust freezes mid-air around their feet. Tiny grains form fleeting geometries, spun into spirals that remain suspended for the heartbeats it takes to blink. The edges of crumpled maps lift, fluttering against their own weight. Engine hoods cool to the touch within seconds. Tires hiss softly against the asphalt. What followed is a record of deliberate choice. The event could have been documented in official reports, but it was not. Instead, the story was directed into song. The corrido tradition absorbed the moment, translating hesitation into melody, indecision into verse. Lyrics shift, pauses stretch. The freeze of the desert becomes rhythm. Certain notes linger longer than others, bending toward recollection, towards memory that resists explanation. He does not move. He does not speak again. Yet the people around him begin to act, steering vehicles into lanes, checking mirrors, shifting weight from foot to foot against the chill. All decisions, small, measured, deliberate, but in tune with an unspoken instruction he has given. Presence over panic. Light glimmers briefly from the far horizon. Headlights from departing trucks cut long white arcs into the desert, slicing through cold air that tastes metallic and dry. Engines start in sync, vibrations humming low, fading fast as if drawn into the desert floor. The night exhales. Dust returns to the sand. Paper flutters settle. Engine warmth disappears. Breath returns to normal, but the memory of cold, of reversed wind, of suspended dust remains. Headlights pull forward and fade. They dissolve into the cold without sound. The flicker of candlelight dances across the chapel walls, painting gold streaks along polished stone floors. Shadows stretch long, leaning into corners where the air holds a quiet reverence. Each flame trembles against the draft from the open doorway, and the scent of melted wax hangs thick, almost tangible, curling upward to meet the low ceiling. Locals whisper of the candle that relit itself. It goes out, then returns to life without hand or match. They say it happened during a prayer for the events along the border road, a moment that drew silence from everyone present. Church records from the day after show an anonymous donation. No name, no note, just coins stacked in careful order, matching the reconstructed timeline investigators follow with hushed attention. The real story is not in ledgers. It is in spaces designed to hold memory when paper fails. The polished stone, the faint echo of voices, the subtle warmth of wax against skin. These preserve what cannot be written. Interviewees recall the sensation, holding warm wax cupped in hands while it cools unevenly, a heat that slips away into stone and air, leaving the memory of it lingering. A woman stands near the altar. She does not speak. She breathes slowly. Her gaze fixes on the stained glass above, the panels depicting journeys and crossings that mirror the route taken on the night the corrido was born. The protagonist mirrors this stillness, breathing measured, eyes steady, chin lifted just enough to catch the light on each facet of glass, absorbing pattern and color with quiet calculation. Some confessions are made without words. The narrator whispers into the space between pews and shadows. Wax begins to drip from the candle, inching down stone steps. Thick drops land and spread, leaving trails that harden almost immediately. Each formation curves with an uncanny precision, echoing the bend of a highway seen before in the embroidered fabric carried by witnesses. Small ridges form in miniature arcs, as if the chapel itself sketches a map in soft matter. The candle shivers and dims. The light loses intensity while the wax settles into shape. The reflections on the stone floor stretch thinner, shadows flatten, and the warm glow retreats to a distant corner. Footsteps are silent. The hush is complete. The chapel absorbs it all. The heat, the light, the pattern in wax that mirrors a journey, a route, a crossing. You notice how space can hold memory in ways paper cannot, how an anonymous hand, a flickering flame, a cooling shape can record a moment more faithfully than any official account. The warmth you feel is subtle. It presses behind ribs. It is quiet. It lingers. Melted wax hardens fully, a rigid curve against stone steps. Candlelight finally dies. Shadows settle. The shape remains. The curve, the journey, the acrid scent of overheated magnetic tape curls through the air, sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. Shelves of cassettes lined the archive walls, their labels yellowed, corners bent, stacked in uneven towers that groan under their own weight. The hum of fluorescent lights mingles with the faint hiss of aging tape reels, creating a soundscape that feels alive, almost anticipatory. Archivists report oddities in playback. Certain lyric lines fade mid-phrase while instruments linger, stretching notes unnaturally long. A guitar riff resolves, a snare drum snaps, and yet the singer's voice disappears and reappears, as though deciding when it wants to be heard. Investigators pore over these tapes and note the phrase "what they destroyed." Lost originals, erased takes, copies overwritten, to explain the inconsistencies, but anomalies persist. The third omen manifests quietly. Collectors today play the same tapes in basements, attics, and studios far from the original archive. Every playback replicates the timing shifts, no matter which machine, no matter the region. They say the lyric bends itself differently each time, yet always in the same subtle rhythm, like water reshaping a path through stone. The protagonist's hands hover over a recorder, fingers brushing dust from the surface. He lifts a tape and inserts it into the machine. Pause. Finger rests lightly on the play button. Eyes track the reel's motion. The movement is deliberate, ritualistic, breath steady. If memory changes, the road stays open. A sound engineer recalls from a session long past. He repeats the line quietly to himself, almost apologetically. No one else speaks. The room listens. Waveforms bloom on a nearby monitor, jagged peaks and valleys representing moments of voice and instrument. Investigators compare patterns from multiple copies. Distortions appear aligned with earlier witness accounts. A slight warble at the precise second a gunshot should have sounded. A flicker in the singer's phrasing, where breath once caught mid-word. Each anomaly mirrors the timeline reconstructed from other oaths, notes, and recollections. Playback slows. The tape stretches under invisible tension. The room tilts into uncertainty, as if time itself hesitates. Reels spin, then wobble. The hiss of magnetic tape swells, and then, abruptly, silence. No hand touches the machine. No finger presses stop. The recorder clicks off by itself. You notice the pause, the empty space where sound should continue. You feel the subtle tightening at the base of your neck. The chest leans forward slightly, as if instinct urges you to chase the missing notes. But nothing comes, only the lingering scent of tape, faintly burnt, as though the memory itself exhales. The anomaly remains unresolved. Every tape holds the corrido, yet the story changes mid-playback. Every distortion is a witness. Every fade is testimony. Each pause in sound shapes the narrative as much as any lyric ever could. Collectors, archivists, engineers, they all report the same uneasy attention, the same half-grip on something tangible yet slipping. Fingers leave the recorder. Dust drifts down from the shelves. Cassettes settle in quiet heaps. Reels stop spinning. Voices trapped in magnetic loops wait, patient. The phenomenon continues without answer. The machine clicks once more. Nothing follows. The accordion drifts across the festival, a ribbon of sound weaving through tents and booths. Children laugh, vendors call, and the warm air carries the notes over tables stacked with embroidered fabrics and local foods. The melody bends around voices, slipping into spaces between laughter and footsteps. Musicians describe how lyrics shift subtly with each performance. Lines change, phrases stretch, words rearrange, yet the emotional weight holds firm. Repetition allows flexibility. The song evolves, carrying its memory even as details bend under countless breaths. Oral transmission preserves the story while permitting small improvisations, ensuring that the core narrative survives. Performers recall moments when the music feels alive in an unusual way. During certain verses, they sense a presence, not seen but felt, through rhythm and breath. One accordionist pauses mid-note, fingers hovering, listening. The tempo changes without instruction. The beat elongates and contracts in response to an unseen cue. One original witness refused interviews before passing. His notes survive only as handwritten annotations, brief lines scrawled in margins, each one a fragment of what he knew. Buried with him are countless nuances, gestures, and pauses never captured in recordings or reports. From a distance, the protagonist watches. Hands rest lightly at the sides, posture balanced between movement and stillness. Eyes sweep the crowd, tracking the interplay of performers and audience, noting the subtle shifts in timing, the weight of pauses, the way air carries notes over bodies and tents. Every detail is observed with quiet attention. Backstage, a performer mutters softly. Songs choose their own endings. The lights of the festival shimmer on brass, steel, and polished wood. Fingers press keys and pluck strings. Voices layer in harmony, overlapping, sometimes clashing, creating a texture that is dense yet airy. Every variation reinforces the pattern. Every pause sharpens anticipation. Crowds move with the music. Some clap in sync, others sway slowly. The accordion responds to the human pulse, stretching and contracting as if aware of the collective breath. Notes rise, fall, spiral, and settle in spaces between tents. The melody bends again. A flute follows, small and insistent, threading through the accordion's roll. Percussion taps quietly, almost hidden, guiding steps and nods. The chorus of voices joins, then parts. Lines are whispered, shouted, and harmonized, each performer interpreting the history in micro-variations that no single recording can capture. The camera moves through the festival, catching fleeting expressions, a hand tapping a table, a pair of eyes closing in recognition, the subtle tilt of a head toward the source of rhythm. Each moment emphasizes connection between performer and audience, past and present, song and memory. As night deepens, crowd noise fades, footsteps slow, Conversations shrink to murmurs. The accordion's roll softens, then ceases. Other instruments drop away. One voice remains, clear, persistent, singing alone. Every note precise, deliberate, unaccompanied. The words echo over empty tents, across grass and stone, carrying the story forward. You feel your breathing slow, shoulders drop slightly, attention narrowing to the single thread of melody. Time stretches around it. Silence settles, punctuated only by the enduring voice, until all that remains is the song and the space it fills. The light falls soft across the wooden table, catching edges of archival photographs and glinting off surfaces worn smooth by decades of handling. Each image holds a fragment, a road cutting through desert dust, a pickup truck idling under an evening sky, a makeshift stage framed by folding chairs and stringed lights. The photographs overlap slightly, corners curling, colors fading, yet the composition feels deliberate, almost as if the table itself arranges memory. Corridos function as cultural mirrors. They reflect events, yet they also refract them, bending details through repetition, community interpretation, and personal recollection. Lines in a song may alter, rhythms shift, but the essence, what the song carries in feeling and consequence, remains. The protagonist occupies both roles, a historical actor and a symbolic figure, shaped and reshaped by retellings that stretch across generations. Political undertones emerge in subtle ways. Control over who records, publishes, and circulates songs along the border influences perception. Selective emphasis, omissions, and repeated motifs direct the collective memory. One photograph shows a stage draped with banners. Another shows empty chairs in the same location years later. What is recorded visually or orally determines which stories gain weight, which fade into background static. Personal choice leaves echoes as well. Decisions small and deliberate ripple outward. A hand resting on a steering wheel, a pause before pressing play, a look held steady in the light. Each acts as a pivot, redirecting events and shaping consequence. Viewers sense these micro-decisions as if they themselves might have made them differently. Music carries continuity beyond paper or photograph. Corridos preserve movement, journeys, crossings, and voices, even when documentation is fragmentary or inconsistent. The accordion roll heard decades earlier, the faint echo of a verse on tape, the lyric whispered in a festival, all survive as living threads of cultural memory. Repetition, variation, and interpretation allow the song to bridge gaps in time and record, giving persistence to moments that might otherwise vanish. Hands move slowly over the photographs. Fingers trace edges, pause over faces, follow the curves of roads and the lines of performance stages. The table is quiet except for the soft rustle of paper. Eyes scan for connections, gestures that repeat, locations that reappear, motifs that carry meaning across decades. Each photograph becomes a node in a network of memory and myth. Songs travel farther than certainty. The narrator intones softly, the voice low enough to merge with the rustle of paper and the faint reflection of light on polished wood. One by one, photographs are turned face down. Corners lift slightly. Shadows stretch across the table as light fades from their surfaces. Each click of paper against wood marks a subtle closure. The stories within remain, carried forward in song, in breath, in collective memory. Breathing slows. The chest rises and falls evenly. Hands rest lightly on the table. The images, the light. They hold both ending and beginning, finality and openness. Viewers are left with quiet attention, a reflective stillness that stretches past the edges of the photographs themselves. The last photograph turns.